only Parshas. Like Vayakhel, it's also Parshas Para. So what we'll do is tonight we'll do Vayakhel, and maybe tomorrow at our Monday Shir we'll study Para, and then also next, we'll figure it out as we go along what we'll study which day. Okay, so we're up to chapter 35, verse 1. So Vayakhel Moshe. Yes, called Das B'nai Israel. Vayomer Aleim Ela Dvarim Asher Tziva Hashem Lasos Osam. So Moshe gathered the congregation, the assembly of Israel, and he said to them, "These are the matters that Hashem commanded to do them." So Moshe gathered the congregation of Israel, and he said, "These are the matters that Hashem commanded to do them." So let's see what it is. But we assume that Parshas Vayakhel is referring to the building of the Mishkan. But before we get to the Mishkan, we get into the laws of Shabbas. Well, you see, what day is this? What day is he gathering them? That's a very interesting. Everyone has to remember, what day is this? Moshe gathered them. What day did they begin the construction of the Mishkan? So Rashi tells us, the day after Yom Kippur, Kishayarad Minahar. So what day are we? We're now the first day after Yom Kippur. Moshe has come down from the mountain. How many months earlier did we leave Egypt? When did we leave Egypt? Pesach. So this is almost exactly 6 months. Almost exactly 6 months, right before the holiday of Sukkot, their first Sukkot ever. Hashem gives them another mitzvah. There's a big, deep relationship between the mitzvah of a sukkah and a mishkan. A sukkah almost looks like a mishkan, with temporary structure. And now we see that the commandment, we say that the mitzvah to build a sukkah comes immediately after Yom Kippur. And right here, right after Yom Kippur, we're getting the commandment to go and build a Mishkan. Now, why is this being done the day after Yom Kippur? Because what happened on Yom Kippur? What happened on the first Yom Kippur after we left Egypt?
We got the forgiveness.
Exactly. Moshe Rabbeinu went up the mountain on the 6th.
It goes off.
He went up the mountain on the 6th day of Sivan, came down on the 17th of Tammuz and saw a golden calf. He broke the tablets, went up for another 40 days, received a partial forgiveness, came down again, and then went up the next day. The next day went up with stones or sapphire stones to make the second set of tablets. And he came down. So this is the third time. He went up 3 times. And he comes down on Yom Kippur. And that's when we were forgiven. So Moshe Rabbeinu comes down from the mountain on Yom Kippur. Now the very next day, and that's what the last portion, the very end of the parasha tells us this. It says, Vayihi beredes Moshe me'ar Sinai. Moshe went down from the mountain, and he had the 2 tablets of stone in his hands, and his face shone. And the next day, he gathered everybody. So this was what's going on here. This is the day after he came down. So it's the day after Yom Kippur. So V'hu Hashon Hifil, it's the causative. She'einu osef anashim b'yadayim. He didn't gather them by hand. He caused them to be gathered, as it states in the Unkos Va'achnesh. He caused them to be gathered. So fine. And then it states in the verse, Sheishet Yamim Te'asem Lacha. 6 days you shall do work. All of a sudden we're talking about Shabbos. Why is he talking about Shabbos then? All of a sudden. Rashi is going to give us 2 answers to this. Rashi is going to tell us why. 6 days you shall gather, you shall do work, and on the 7th day shall be holy. Shabbat Shabbaton Hashem. It'll be a Shabbos to God. Kol seva melacha yunas. 6 days you shall work, and on the 7th day it is Shabbos. Whoever does work on that day shall die. So why is the commandment of Shabbos right before the commandment to build a Mishkan? Kobe, do you see the pizza?
Yeah.
You don't like it?
No, it was good.
Oh, you ate it already?
No. No, I'm not hungry for pizza right now.
You're not hungry? All right.
Just making myself some chocolate.
Oh, okay, there's hot water you could just add.
Yeah, that's what it is.
All right. So it was the 6th day, and on the 7th day will be holy for you, a Shabbos for God. Whoever does work shall die, will die. Hold on 1 second. 1 second. Okay. So Rashi says, what's the reason why Shabbos is before the Mishkan? But Moshe told him the prohibition of Shabbos before the commandment to build the Mishkan, to tell us she'enu docho es Shabbos. It's to tell us that the building of the Mishkan does not override the Shabbos. The Gemara gives a second answer. The Gemara gives another answer. It's to tell us, the Gemara tells us, how do we know what are the prohibited activities on Shabbos? Anything that was needed for the construction of the Mishkan. Anything that was needed for the construction of the Mishkan is prohibited to do on Shabbos. So this is what the Talmud says. It's so ironic that they're the two holiest things. We have the holiness of space is the temple, and the holiness of time is Shabbat. And the Talmud teaches us that you can't make the holiness of time by violating Shabbat. And everything that we need to know about Shabbat, we know from the holiness of space, which is the Mishkan. The two are intertwined, and also but also the way to celebrate both is derived from the other, telling us that both are essential aspects of our life, that we need to have a holiness of space. We need to be able to go to a space in order to acquire holiness. We need to be able to have a time in our lives which we designate for holiness. Akiva, you trying to say something? Oh, okay. So you have to, Colby, it's a very, very important message. When you think about it, most people who don't have faith, they don't have this concept of holiness of space and holiness of time. We take it for granted. Well, there was a friend of my wife's, who's not of the Jewish faith. She came for a little bit, like she showed up for a few hours to spend, to just wish us a congratulations. She doesn't even live in America. She came with her children, wonderful family. They're not of the Jewish faith, but they're incredible people. And her children, she has 3 children under the age of 15, like between 11 and 15. And they had never seen a faith community up close. And they were just, I think, they were very confused and shocked by the concept of what it means to be immersed in a faith community. So Jeff, we take these concepts for granted, most of us, because we've been living it for a very large portion of our life. But you can't underestimate the power, the transformative healing power of what it does to us to have a space and a time that's sacred every single day, and then even more sacred every single week, and even more sacred every month, and even more sacred on the holidays. Yes, Akiva.
Why are we allowed to use fire to cook that's already existing on Yom Tov, but not on Shabbos?
So the Shabbos. So first of all, you're jumping ahead to the next verse. But there is a distinction between Shabbos and Yontif, and the distinction is about cooking. Excuse me. The distinction is about cooking, that we're allowed to cook on Yontif, because Yontif, we celebrate the concept of Yontif is a concept of joy. The concept of Shabbos is the main concept of the celebration of Shabbos is that we can't create. The main concept of the celebration of Yontif is not that we can't create, but that we have joy. And one of the essential ways of joy is to be able to cook. And so therefore we want to be able to celebrate, and the way we celebrate positively is with food. So that's the Torah never tells us why we're allowed to cook. That's just my theory. But we're allowed to cook on Yontif, and not only that, we're allowed to do primary activities to prepare the food on Yontif, and we're not allowed to do it on the Shabbos. You're exactly right.
Fire, you can't create fire.
Right, you
You
can't.
can't create it, that's the thing.
But on Shabbos, you can't even use the fire.
Yeah,
You can have the fire in your house.
you can have a fire in your house, but the fire needs to be covered up
Right.
so that you don't cook with it. I mean, you can have a fire, but you can't cook on it on Shabbos. So there is a major distinction,
Right.
and that's the next verse. Akiva is correct in pointing out.
Wait, are you allowed to use like non-electrical instruments on Yontif? It's about joy. A little bit.
You mean, like, for example, tell me what you're talking about.
Well, because you're allowed to use a shofar.
Oh, so a musical instrument.
So are you allowed to blow a trumpet?
So technically speaking, in the temple, they used to blow trumpets on Shabbos. The Levites would do it because it's not a biblical commandment against making music. It was a rabbinic commandment because there was the concern that maybe the utensil would break, and then we would attempted to repair it. So in the temple itself, there's no rabbinic prohibitions in the temple. It's called Ein Shvus B'Mikdash. So in the temple, the Levites used to play musical instruments on Shabbos, but the rabbis did not allow it outside the temple. This became a point of major contention in when the Reform movement started. Originally, the Reform movement was finding sources for they started to play music on Shabbos because, first of all, it wasn't even prohibited biblically. And so they said, if there's no biblical prohibition, we can do it. So there became a major question in the Orthodox community. Maybe we can hire a Gentile to play the music for us on Shabbos, and that would enhance our services. You have live music, have a guy strumming the organ or the guitar, and well, why can't you just ask a Gentile to do it? Because that's a rabbinic prohibition. And we say it will be two rabbinic prohibitions. One, the whole idea of playing music is rabbinic. And then asking a Gentile is another rabbinic. And it's a rabbinic prohibition upon a rabbinic prohibition. And it should be allowed, certainly for the purpose of enhancing a prayer service. But the rabbis in the 18th century the Orthodox rabbis were very adamant that it's not allowed. And they were also very adamant against praying in the vernacular because this took on major sociological division, because there was the concern that the people would merge with Reform Judaism at the time. And so a lot of these laws the major concern is who's in the community and who's out. The halachic fights, the most vicious halachic fights, are not halachic fights about what's technically permitted, but about sociological barriers breaking down. We saw a major fight, within the Orthodox community a few years ago. Hold on, my son is asking me. And he was asking me about mincha. So there was a major fight within the Orthodox community about, hey, Ezra, about women rabbis in the Orthodox community. Again, it was not strictly speaking a halachic fight. It was mostly sociological about who's in and who's out. You need a chumash, Ezra. You need a chumash, Ezra. Do we have them down here? Yes, we do. So, thank you, Ezra. So good to see you, my friend. To the left, to the left, to the left.
It's always been accepted that women give women shirim. Right.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is, it really wasn't a halachic fight, but that doesn't make it any less important or significant. It was mostly a fight over what do we want our community to look like. There's no question in my mind that those who were against the women rabbis in the Orthodox community were victorious in that fight. I mean, they shut it down. And so for 90, over 90% of the Orthodox world, 98%, it's not it's just not it's a non-starter. It's a non-starter. Okay.
Most of like the Orthodox.
There's some, very few.
Feel that women can be leaders of services.
I personally don't.
Yeah, so I'm saying it's a sociological, like, what do we want our community to look like? So I don't want to get into that now. Let's talk about it later. So let's go to the next verse. Just go, so Akiva jumped ahead. We're chapter 35, verse 3. Now how to make a fire in all your dwelling places on the Shabbos. You cannot make a fire in all your dwelling places on the Shabbos. So why, of all the prohibitions, there's some pizzas where you can help yourself. So you might want to stick it in the microwave to make it a little bit warmer. That's up to you. I can't tell you how to cook. So you know how to make a fire in all your dwelling places on Shabbos. What's the obvious question? How many prohibitions are there on Shabbos, Kobe? 39, not just one. Why does the Torah only talk about one prohibition? So that's the obvious question, at which we actually came along recently in our text of the Talmud. So the Talmud tells us, so Rashi quotes the Talmud, and it appears several places in the Talmud. Rashi says, Yesh mi Rabbeinu omrim havar l'lav yotzais, yesh omrim l'chalek yotzais. So basically, what does this mean? So it's to tell us, the first idea is to tell us that it's a lav yotzais, that it's just a prohibition. All the other prohibitions of the Torah, that if they, what do you got there, Max? Okay, yeah, Baruch Hashem, that should be enough, I think. So thank you, Max. All the other prohibitions of the Torah all the other prohibitions of Shabbos, if you violate them, you get stoning intentionally. Pares, if it was done without a warning, or chata, sin offering was done accidentally. The prohibition of fire, according to this opinion in the Talmud, is different. You just get lashes. It's not a severe prohibition. What would be the reason? The reason would be to tell us that because fire is what's called a malacha gerua, it's not as intense. It's not as intense a prohibition, but meaning it's not as difficult to do. So it's a lesser, and maybe it's because it's allowed on Yom Tov. Maybe that's why it's allowed on Yom Tov. To go back to Akiva's question, the other concept is that Shabbos, is l'chalek yotzes. That this is telling us that Shabbos is not different, but Shabbos is teaching us a principle that one is going to be in violation of the prohibition of Shabbos. One is in violation if one forgets that it's Shabbos and he does different types of work that are prohibited. We're going to view it as a distinct category, and he's going to get a separate set of lashes for each and every one of the 39 violations that he does. Meaning to say, we don't view it as one overriding prohibition, but as 39 separate violations for each one of the different activities that he does. So this is the reason why it was. So it's just an example. It's nothing really. There was nothing really unique about fire according to this approach of Rabbi Yishmael. It's just rather a paradigm for everything else, that it's a separate category. Okay, so now everybody with me on this? So these are the powerful ideas about the Shabbos and the connection between Shabbos and the Mishkan. Now we go into chapter 35, verse 4. Vayomer Moshe al kol hadas b'nei Yisrael lemor. Moshe says to all of the Yober, I made a mistake that the davening starts at 6:50, not 6:45. So Vayomer Moshe al kol hadas b'nei Yisrael lemor. Moshe said to the entire community of Israel, saying, Zeh hadavar asher tzivah Hashem lemor. This is the matter. Whenever the Torah says this, it needs to be expounded. It's almost like Moshe's pointing at something. And whenever it says lay more, it's also almost as though it's pointing at something. So it says, this is the matter that Hashem. Oh, Michael, good afternoon. What are you looking for? A siddur? Is it there on the table? Max just brought down. He says, this is the matter that Hashem commanded me, lay more lachem. So Rashi here is bothered by the fact that it could have just, it didn't need to say more. It said, this is the matter that God commanded, saying this is the matter that Hashem said, lay more. It says it twice. The word lay more appears twice. So it says, commanded me to say to you. Okay, so he says, verse 5, what's he saying? Take from you an offering to God, kol nadiv libo, anyone who is generous of his heart, Yeviyaz Chumas Hashem, should bring a gift to God, Zahav Chesef Unachoshes. Anyone who's generous, nadiv libo, what a beautiful phrase, a generous of the heart. I give everybody here a bracha that you have this phrase, that you be called the generous of the heart. That's my bracha to all of you, that you be called that. Oh, I would like to say, Michael, that we just got a message from your wife. She says, Shavua Tov from the Mekong River, looking at Laos and thinking about you all. I'm not even sure. Isn't Laos in Cambodia?
Different countries. They're different countries.
North of Cambodia, east of Thailand.
So Laos is just a different country.
She's right there. They're visiting.
Well, Deborah, you're
His mother. Parents.
yeah.
She lives there?
What?
She lives there?
The mother does.
Oh, wow.
She's in the Golden Triangle, Deborah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Deborah, we're all rooting for you here. Thanks for telling us that our Torah is literally going around the world. The Torah from Yeshiva Sali Melech is literally going around the world, thanks to Deborah Kopp. So, let me just do this Rashi and then we'll stop. He says, or maybe we'll have actually a couple more. So it says the following. It says, so he says, what does that mean? Al Shem Shelibo Nudvo. His heart makes him generous. Because his heart makes him generous, he's called generous of the heart. And Rashi says, now Rashi is going to tell us, I already explained the donations to the Mishkan and its work, Bimkom Tzavatan, where they were commanded, were mostly commanded in Parshas Kisisa, or Parshas Truma to 7 Kisisa. The Rashi says, I'm not going to explain them twice. But nevertheless, there's sometimes that he does add on to it. He adds on some things, so we'll be able to refer to those parts that he adds on. But really, tomorrow we're going to study Parshas Para, because Parshas Para is also read this week, and we haven't studied that yet, but we have time to do the next Rashi, which is to verse 11. It says, as a Mishkan Mesa'olo, he says, every person donate the Mishkan and its tent, Mes Michseo, as Karasav, as Karashav, as Pichav, as Abadav, as Adanav. The Mishkan and its tent and its coverings, its hooks, its beams, its bars, its pillars, and its sockets. What does it mean, the Mishkan? Yeriot HaTachtonot, Hanirot B'tocho. What's called the Mishkan? This refers to the lower panels, which are visible from within the Mishkan, the lower panels of the roof, which is made up out of the skin of the animals. That's called the Mishkan. SRO, its tent. This refers to the tent of goat skin, which is made for the roof. And Merseo, this is the skin of the rams and the Tachash. Tachash, Rashi said earlier, is this mythical creature. Some say the unicorn, some say it was the dugong, a mythical creature which was the top layer of, some say a seal, which was the top layer of the Mishkan. Okay, we'll stop our recording here so we can daven mincha. Yashar koach to everyone.